Hi, welcome to another episode of the Innovating Together podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Burns from the University Innovation Alliance. And today I'm really excited to bring you a different type of episode. It's going to be a public debate between myself and an investor about whether college is worth it. I'll give a little background about that. But first, I want to share that this is sponsored by Mainstay, which is a public, it's a platform that is a student engagement and retention platform that has been used by countless institutions who have actually been able to use it to address things like summer melt, improving the experience of student, triaging issues that students have in real time, regardless of whether or not your office is open. They are a chatbot provider, but they do so much else. And if you are looking to improve the experience of students on your campus, you should definitely take a look at mainstay.com, because not only will they give you all the different use cases, but they actually have peer-reviewed studies that will show you that it works. Second, it's also sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, who is a longtime friend of the UIA. We're so grateful for their help. So today, I mentioned, is a unique episode. It features me going into a public debate on a stage with an audience that is, I would say, generally venture capital and ed tech, defending the honor of higher education. So this was, there was a lot on my shoulders for this. I would tell you that what you're about to hear and see was the best I could do that day. I would definitely offer different points now, but here's what I wanted to give as a window behind the scenes. So first, when you're preparing, so this is the Disagreement Podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast that they tee up critical questions in society, and they create a public debate, and they have a very interesting format that, I mean, it felt very spicy. It felt very much like a debate on an issue of public relevance. And they just released the episode. And so we are going to be rebroadcasting that now. What I would also share is that I had no idea going into it what their prep was, but here is a little window. I did not actually know. I assumed I was going to be defending college. The topic was, is college worth it? And my opponent was Ryan Craig, who is a partner at Achieve Capital, and he has written a couple books about higher education, specifically one recently about apprenticeships and Apprenticeship Nation. So he's kind of the apprenticeship guy. So I could infer that it was going to be traditional higher ed model versus apprenticeships. Ryan is someone who actually comes somewhat from higher ed. He is a former protege of Michael Crow's back at Columbia, and has been in the investment space for a long time. And I like Ryan personally. So, but we didn't have a prep call together. We did not speak. There was no, we were not encouraged to talk prior. So there was no prep in that way. We had a brief call with the Disagreement team where they at least laid out the format, but there was no discussion or like, you know, so I was a former competitive high school and college debater. And one of the things you want to do is figure out what the resolution, what is the topic you're going to debate? And then you want to map out the ground. Like, I'm going to argue this much room and you're going to argue for this position. And this is where there's the tension and kind of here's the line. And so there wasn't really a clear establishment of ground in terms of, I generally didn't know what I was going to have to defend. Like, is it traditional four-year higher ed? Is it higher ed today? Or is it higher ed over all time? I think just giving you a sense of, there was a lot of breadth and depth to how I was trying to think about this going in. And I also, you know, if you're answering, is college not, essentially Ryan's position needed to advance that college was not worth it. And I think that it was an enjoyable experience. It was spicy. I will say I'm probably a little sassier than I would normally be at work. And I do want to apologize for that. I knew that Ryan had released a very explicit and clear takedown of Georgetown Center for the Education Workforce data a week prior in his newsletter. And I read it, and I knew that he had some valid points about that some of that data on economic returns, there has been some change, and also that model is missing how much a student would be earning if they were not in school these are all minor points, but I knew that if I came in and I just did the traditional thing that you do in higher ed, like, you earn $1 million more in your lifetime, it's worth it, and seen, that was not going to be responsive, or really that was probably what they were going to expect me to do. And so I purposely did not make that case. So I just want to let you know that on the front end, that I think if I was you, you'd probably expect that I was going to come in and start with the very traditional points that we make about higher ed. But I tried not to, because I thought that would goad him into ground that he was planning for. And I wanted it to be a fair fight. So, all that to say, I hope that it's interesting for you. I really enjoyed watching it back. I think I tried really hard to defend the honor of higher ed. I hope I did you proud, but I know that I could do a better job now. And I wanted to give you some behind the scenes of how, when preparing for a debate like this, how much I knew going in. I knew not very much, and they purposely kept us apart. And I thought it was a really interesting format. And I also just think in general, it's really nice to have examples of respectful discourse and debate. And I think that Ryan did a great job. I was probably a little bit too sassy. Again, I think you will understand when I felt like I had to defend the honor of our entire sector. So apologies there. All that to say, this is a product of something that just simply wouldn't exist if you didn't have the ASU+GSV Summit. So if you have never been, I just want to give you my read on this event so you understand the room I'm walking into. The vast majority of the people there are ed tech, K-12, higher ed, ed tech, and venture capital and investors who are trying to find out what investments to make, what companies are solving what problems. And then there is I think a growing group of higher ed folks, but it's still very, very small comparatively. I think it's more than 5,000 people at this conference. I could be wrong. And then there's a larger amount of K-12 folks. And what I love is that Michael Crow, Deborah Quazzo, and Michael Moe, who are the GSV and the ASU, decided that this table needed to exist, this room needed to exist, that you have ed tech out here trying to find problems to solve and prototype their solutions and stand them up. You have venture capital who's trying to figure out what to invest in. And then you have education, K-12 and higher ed, who are the consumers. And if this room didn't exist, if the ASU+GSV Summit didn't exist, these groups would not recognize how interdependent they are. They would often have conversations in silos in a transactional way. And what I like about the ASU+GSV Summit is you do actually get to form relationships with people who have a completely different perspective and background. And I think it is our best chance that the right solutions get funded early in the pipeline, so that when we are showing up as consumers in the marketplace from the higher ed space, that the solutions out there are solving the actual problems that we have. So that's the reason why I think people should go, because I think that it's really important that our interests be represented. And also because then I don't end up with more rooms that were vast majority ed tech and venture capital, which is what I had at this event. So all that to say, I hope you'll consider coming. It is it's a little overwhelming, and don't worry, I have a whole session I do to prep you to go. But here is a taste of the ASU+GSV Summit, the Disagreement, that is hosted by Alice Grodd and myself debating against Ryan Craig, who is from Achieve Partners.
Grodd. I'm the founder of The Disagreement. We are a media company dedicated to enabling healthy, productive conversations across lines of difference. So, clearly a need for that in our current moment, in our current culture. This is going to be a live recording of our podcast. So if you like it and want to listen again, we'll release this in the next week or two. Just quick housekeeping, and then I will introduce our two esteemed disagreeers. This is going to be about 40 minutes. This is going to be a speed round for us. Normally, we record on the podcast 75 to 90 minutes, so we're just going to get into it, and it's going to be amazing. Second, this is not a formal debate, okay? So it is not, you have 1 minute, and then you have 1 minute. This is an organic, free-flowing disagreement. Sort of picture what you would have like, at the corner of a party after a few glasses of wine. That's what we're going to be trying to replicate here. With that, before we begin, how many of you, raise your hand, if you have either children or loved ones in your life that are navigating the college process currently or will be navigating the college process in the near future? Show of hands. Okay, so that's some pressure on the two of you to really be helpful here, and here we go. So, our two guests today on the disagreement. Is college worth it? First, Dr. Bridget Burns. Clap it up for Dr. Bridget Burns, please. I'm doing very short bios for both of you. You have, relatively lengthy resumes. So, Dr. Bridget Burns is the founding CEO of the University Innovation Alliance, a consortium of public research universities operating as a national laboratory for student success and innovation. Clap again. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Since 2014, she has helped UIA campuses produce 143,000 additional graduates, increasing the number of low-income graduates by 41% and graduates of color by 89%. All right, yeah, look, a three clapper. We got to get going, so keep it to one or two for Ryan.
I don't want any claps.
Okay, no claps. Ryan Craig is the managing director at Achieve Partners and was formerly a managing director at University Ventures. He is the author of a number of books, including most recently, Apprentice Nation, How the Earn and Learn Alternative to Higher Education Will Create a Stronger and Fairer America. Okay, one clap, there we go. With that, we are just gonna get right into it. We're gonna start at a high level, and then we'll sort of systematically unpack and flesh out all the arguments. But here we go. Bridget, is college worth it?
Well, obviously, I thoroughly believe it is worth it. And I think the real question here is worth it for whom, right? It obviously needs to improve in terms of its ability to turn around really measurable ROI in terms of economic value in the lives of individuals, but we also have to evaluate it collectively. Like, we want to live in a society of educated people because they vote 50% more, they live 7 years longer, they contribute more to society. For every dollar invested in higher education, 4 goes back into the economy, right? Like, they pay more taxes. Like, there's just so much more. Also, more than half of all the actual research happening in society is happening at colleges and universities. So I think for all of us, we're in a better space. College, yes, definitely worth it for society. For the individual, we definitely need to improve and refine. And I also think that college, I run a group of I work for a group of institutions who are actively refining, transforming, and improving. So I'm 100% say that we have definitely made missteps in the past, and we can improve upon it. We are doing that work now. There is clearly a need for us to serve people better, more effectively, more efficiently. We need to serve a wider swath of the population. College is no longer just for 18 to 22-year-olds. It has to actually take seriously our responsibility in society about the economic competitiveness of society and the preservation of our democracy. I think college is absolutely worth it, 100%. I'm not interested in defending for-profit education that has damaged the lives of millions of people in the past. I'm talking about good old American community colleges and universities, what they actually do, and that includes a wide array of things, including some of the smaller skill-based things that I'm sure my friend over to the right, who is, a vocal defender of apprenticeships, will talk about. And I just, as I turn back to you for you to defend, I just want to, I don't know if you know this, but Ryan is definitely someone who is living the embodiment of apprenticeships, because he went to an apprenticeship at, was it Yale? Yale?
And we're off.
Touche, absolutely. Well, I'm going to disagree without being disagreeable. But in terms of just the numbers, the sheer numbers, if you look at for every 100 students who make the decision to enroll and matriculate into a accredited post-secondary institution, about a quarter, of those who make the decision to matriculate, nearly half are not completing their degree program, and those who complete, over half are underemployed upon graduation. So you actually, of those who matriculate, only about a quarter are actually achieving the result that they had hoped for, which is a good first job, a job that actually required the investment of time and money and debt in most cases in the degree. So if you look at it in that way, just the sheer numbers, for most people, it's not worth it, right? If you were to say, like, to take the Rawlsian position
you think they got college? You think that if they tried and they went to college and they didn't actually complete because the institution was not designed around them and because they dropped out, you're saying that is what you're evaluating, is those who went to college and got no degree?
Well, right. If they drop out of no degree, I don't believe there are stats on sort of what the employment outcomes are of stopouts and dropouts, but they're not good, and they're worse than those who completed and are underemployed. So it's not working for most. Certainly not working for all. You would agree with that. It's not working for most. So is it worth it as currently constituted, as currently structured? It is not. I have sent my eldest son to college. I did attend college. I love college. In fact, my very first job as a teenager was working for a college. My mother was a community college professor back in Canada. My first job out of law school was working for our mutual mentor, Michael Crow, godfather of this.
Which one do you think he's going to like after today? The one who defends the thing he does?
Yeah. No, look, I think that we are, you know, it's not worth it for most people today the way it's currently structured.
All right, let's quickly define the key term here, which is worth it, okay? So I've spent the past week sort of getting up to speed on this debate. I'm a K-12 guy. And I would say 99.9% of the conversation around it, whether or not it's worth it, is economic ROI driven. So Bridget, when you think about worth itness, is it purely an economic calculus, or are there other factors that you are thinking in that definition?
I mean, well, it's so much more than just numbers and dollar value. And as much as my homeboy to the right really wants to just spend all his time thinking about Georgetown's education and the workforce data, and it's just about dollars, I think anyone who's living in America right now understands how much you want to live in a society where people actually understand how to listen to other people's ideas, how to be nimble and malleable, and how to adapt in terms of how they think. And I think, especially as we're thinking about AI, it's about learning critical thinking. It's about exposing you to a broader type of people and getting out of your bubble that you grew up in. There's so much more that is about the richness of really the awakening of the soul for a person. I would say first off, the word college is actually the word to be defined, because it is a broad, diverse, there's so many types of colleges. And yes, those that are unserving people, that are leaving them in worse condition than they came in, should be shut down. That is, I am not interested in defending that. I am, however, I want to be very clear that you clearly believe that if they were successful, that it would be worth it. So then let's have that debate about how to improve the experience and the likelihood of success, because I think that's a very different, and I think you and I have a lot of common ground there. But sorry, back to the point, yes, it's not just economic returns. As someone who grew up in poverty in rural Montana, and higher education completely changed my life, I am very aware of the fact that there's a lot of rich people who are at conferences like this who always want to prescribe apprenticeships for poor people's kids, but not for their own. And I just think that it's absolutely a problem that we should be thinking about who is affected.
Fourth clap. Let's get Ryan in here.
You know, the problem is that we just don't have enough alternative sources. Why? Like, I agree with you. All of those values that you just cited are really critical values. Why is America in the place it's in today? I would suggest it's in the place it's in today because we have done a terrible job as a country at redistributing the gains from trade and helping dislocated workers and dislocated communities and telling them that there's one pathway here, which is college, classroom, tuition, debt, and no guaranteed employment outcome. And guess what? More than half of America doesn't think that works anymore. So, like, why are we in the, like, all of those values are good, but if we could figure out how to address this issue of displacement, displaced workers, displaced communities, economic mobility in a more efficient, effective way, I think we could actually get to those values more effectively. The fact is, as a nation, we have dramatically overinvested in classroom-based, tuition-based, debt-based career launch infrastructure. We have dramatically underinvested in earn and learn career launch infrastructure. And you just look at other countries, they are an order of magnitude or two higher in terms of their investment in earn and learn career launch infrastructure. We've put everything on red, right? We've put all our chips on this one model for career launch, and it has not served us well. It is not serving us well. College is great if it works, and it's not working for most people the way it's structured today.
It definitely has to improve, yeah.
Yeah.
I would also, I love how Achieve Partners, how many people who've gotten apprenticeships are employed there? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So here's the thing is that I actually think higher education has a role to play in all of this. I work with institutions who are actually talking about pulling, like integrating apprenticeships. There are more dynamic models. I think higher education has to innovate. That's why I work with the most innovative institutions. Those that are not willing to adapt and evolve, then we actually have to talk about consequences. But in the end, you are right and the public is right about the need for ROI.
You're talking about on an institution by institution level, and the reality is that it's not black and white like that. The vast majority of institutions have programs that are working actually pretty well right now. And your institutions probably have a dozen programs each that don't work very well. But they continue to run these programs and enroll students in these programs and take tuition from these students and have students take on debt and are generating negative economic outcomes, even from those who graduate.
I get what you're talking about, the USC example that everyone keeps trotting out, which is like for a counseling degree that costs so much and has little reward. But it's more of a trope that we trot out.
Too.
And I would just say, I am not going to defend that behavior, but I do think we have to change the decision-making calculus about what we offer. I think it is insane that people can offer a program because a faculty member just wants to teach a class. There has to actually be a role that someone is going to need to fill or a skill that they need to apply. There needs to be a different way that we analyze and decide. And the problem is you're leaving college presidents, that is the hardest job that you could possibly do right now.
Absolutely.
And we are making it more difficult when we don't understand the complexity of the decision-making process and help actually chart a path forward together, which is, yes, there should be economic return and we should be held accountable. My institutions are committed to not just doing that, but also improving value and ROI. That work is a lot murkier and we actually need to think less baby bathwater and more, how do we actually build it by
everything that UIA is doing, I think is absolutely like in line with the stuff that we believe. But the point is that it's not working great right now. If you actually map, this is data from Strata 6 or 7 years ago. If you look at the top 6 most popular majors that students, undergraduates major in when they graduate, and you map those to the top 6 most popular jobs that they take, there is no correlation whatsoever. So we have this giant swirl of students who are trying to find their way out of these degree programs. No connection whatsoever. And it's because colleges and universities have not been held accountable for employment outcomes. If you ask a college or university, what are your employment outcomes? Most of them will say, oh, we survey our graduates 9-12 months after they graduate, and those who respond, 85% inform us that they're either employed or in graduate school, but we have no idea what they're doing. And I don't blame the schools. The government, the funder, and the accreditors aren't making them actually track employment outcomes.
Well, hold on one second. Yeah. I just want to crisp this up for the audience. So we talked a lot about ROI. Bridget, you recognize that when it comes to the likely economic outcome of someone matriculating to college, it's different than it was 20 years ago, 40. Paul Tuff in the New York Times calls it, going to college used to be like a treasury bond. You were going to get a very clear, safe payout. And now it's like more like a casino, depending on what your major is, whether you finish, what the opportunities, your socioeconomic demographic or racial demographic. So there is an economic ROI issue. I think your position, and I'm just trying to summarize for the audience, is that we should be focusing on reforming the institutions to address those issues. And so you're talking about curriculum, updating curriculum, making it more in line, having better workforce training embedded in the curriculum. And Ryan, your theory of change is to, supplement with earn-to-learn apprenticeships.
Honestly, create competition. I mean, my career has been in and around higher education, and one of my favorite sayings is, no one has ever gone broke betting against the pace of change in higher education. Bridget is doing her darndest to try and accelerate these institutions, her coalition of the willing, but that's a small fraction of the schools we're talking about. There are many schools who are not in that coalition and are not changing, and right now are, frozen and probably not going to innovate for the next 3 years because of all the crises that this government has brought to them. And meanwhile, they're going to enroll hundreds of thousands of additional students who are not going to generate an economic return, be underemployed, be dislocated, be disgruntled. And we're just going to continue to have this cycle. So we need to build these earn and learn pathways where there's no economic, or there's less economic risk, there's less employment risk involved with it, and that lead to jobs that we know are out there. We know there are models for doing it, and I think that only once we have an actual critical mass of these seats in these, and frankly, jobs that don't require degrees, colleges will then be forced to reform, not the UIA schools, but the rest, because the students aren't going to show up anymore and pay. I think that's what it's going to take.
You talk about, I would say, one, the earlier point about accountability. Here's the thing that people don't understand. It's not necessarily, yes, hold accountable, great. But do you know what they're not accountable for? Like, there's really very little things. There hasn't been an accountability measure put in. That's the problem. I'm supposed to do long-term career outcomes. I'm also mental health. I'm also supposed to economic development. I'm also teaching and research. I'm also innovation and change. They have to do everything and be everything to everyone. And then you're like, well, but why my one thing over here, which we have not aligned resources around? We don't actually give you money for that. We don't pay for
Totally.
that.
As a country without much of a safety net, and you're familiar with this, Alex, in K-12 schools, we ask our K-12 schools to do 100 different things, and then we blame them for not achieving academic excellence. I agree with that.
Yeah, but your reflection on my point, I would just say, college is not a monolith, and it is a very individual choice, and we have to do a far better job actually helping people be successful with it. The institutions have to change and adapt, and we're not the only ones. There's a APLU institution, all the community colleges, there's vibrancy, there's so much impact and value being created. You do make broad sweeping generalizations that are primarily benefiting from a shady for-profit sector that has done irreparable damage to society at times, which is not all for-profit, by the way. There are plenty of good ones. Like, it's not a monolith.
Well, you'll be glad to know that we basically spend nothing on apprenticeship and earn and learn pathways in terms of public dollars.
I just don't think it has to be outside a classroom. I think that the idea that higher ed needs to improve, yes, and we should also involve apprenticeships. We should integrate things in the classroom. Our solution on college to career was literally the one place all students go is the classroom. That is where no more career services, put it inside the classroom. Every single class should have a career readiness experience, a career readiness conversation. You should actually be equipped to go to a job interview and be able to talk about what you did in the classroom, and it could actually position you well. Like, we have to change a lot.
It's gonna get a lot worse before it gets better, because AI is changing entry-level jobs. They're no longer going to employers just aren't going to be hiring people because they have a degree and the potential to do the job. They're not going to want people doing menial work from day one.
You think it's just going to be skilled trades? I mean,
no, not skilled trades, but they're going to have essentially, because you're going to be expected to do higher value work from day one, because you're going to be using AI to do the menial work you used to do. You're going to have prior work experience in order to do that higher value work. And unless colleges and universities can figure out how to integrate real, relevant, paid work experience into their academic programs, so these are apprenticeships is an easy one, because you can graduate and then go into a job that doesn't demand the prior experience, because they're giving you the experience and skills in the apprenticeship. But I'm talking co-ops, internships, work integrated learning projects like the ones Ripen offers today.
Colleges.
That is critical. And what tell me, can you convince me that in 5 years' time, every student at every college is going to have a meaningful work-based learning opportunity? I don't believe it.
Well,
they're not going to do it.
I think right now the spice is here, right? Like, if you ever needed something as an accelerant, I think that higher education has ignored the feedback of the public for a really long time and been apart from an elitist. There's been this like dissidence where we're just kind of like, yeah. And we're also like, we're totally uncomfortable with admitting we had a role to play when it comes to jobs. So that is the past. I think that, the consequences came, right? And they're not great, and things are very difficult right now. But I think institutions, the accelerant is here, and I see change happening so much faster that I couldn't possibly update you on everything you described is happening at institutions across the country so much faster than they ever did, because you can't not.
So that is shocking to someone. Ryan,
honestly, I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I think that the schools where that's happening are UIA schools, and they may be here, but they're, the ones that are 90% who are not here, that's not happening. They're hunkered down. They've lost NIH funding. They're having a budget crisis. They're not spending money on work-based learning. No way.
Ryan, what if you had a magic wand? I want to crisp this up. What would the ratio of apprenticeships over the next few years?
Let me just clarify. I'm the apprenticeship guy, but let me clarify. There's a spectrum here where apprenticeships is on the right. It's the most involved. You have like a company actually hiring someone full time. But then work backwards on that spectrum. You have co-ops, right? A formal co-op program. Hard for us to understand. There are only like 10 universities in the country that actually do formal co-op. But it exists, it can exist. Then you have internships, which we know are in short supply. We know are unsystematic, informal, relationship-based, inequitable, the way they're currently structured. And we have this sort of emerging work-based learning platforms like Ripen and Parker Dewey and Extern. And so, it's a, depending on your program of study, right? You could have, sort of mix and match from that. But the reality is there is a dramatic shortage in each of those categories relative to the demand. When one of our companies launches an apprenticeship program, we have 300, 400 applicants for every seat in these apprenticeship programs. These are full-time jobs that pay $50,000 to $60,000. You don't not expected to have relevant skills, relevant experience. We give you that. We're just looking for cognitive skills, durable skills, and the ability to learn the job and the tech platform. So you can imagine why that's exciting to people. But it's just I wrote an article a year plus ago that I think summarizes the dilemma.
It was a TikTok.
The dilemma that high school graduates face in this country, and it was called College or Chipotle. And that's really where we are. We're basically saying it's college for all, and that we're still in the college for all era, even though I think that both parties have sort of come off of it. But in terms of an investment, like, look where we're spending the money. It's all being spent on college today. And it's the alternative is like, yes, there are jobs available. They're frontline service jobs. You can work in retail. You can work in hospitality. Where are the career paths there? But out of high school, we have one model, and that's just not true in other countries. Like in Europe, for example, you can graduate from high school and become a pharmacy assistant. You can go to work in a pharmacy, become an assistant, and then become a pharmacist. Yep. Without having to go to college, without earning a degree. We don't allow that in this country because of licensure and degree requirements associated with licensure. It is a higher education industrial complex that has co-opted the professions and licensure, and it's not working.
Bridget.
So you're okay with the doctor? You want a doctor that just did an apprenticeship too? I'm just kidding. That's obviously I'm going, Betty. I would just say, so when it comes to apprenticeships, there's one person on the stage who's actually been directly affected by them. Both my parents actually pursued apprenticeships. My mom was a plumber. My dad was actually went to farrier school and was a horseshoer. And to put this all in context of why we should be thinking differently about college. So I think our issue here is that we think college is a one-shot deal. We think that you're either someone who goes or doesn't. You're someone who gets an apprentice or doesn't. And my dad was someone who, he thought college wasn't for him. And so he was doing what millions of other Americans do, which is using their body to exchange their time for money. And then one day he went into work and a horse flipped over on him and paralyzed him. And all of a sudden, just like that, millions of other people learned this lesson in COVID too, which is that you at some point, your body will break down. Yes, at 19, being a lineman, I would make so much more money, but not at 45. Okay, so at some point, you want people to have the adaptability, the choice to be able to convert their lives and pivot to enter the knowledge economy. So thank God my dad was able to cash in his GI Bill and go get a bachelor's degree in computer science, right? You want things like that because it's not that I get an apprenticeship and I'm done for life. It's actually, how do we integrate these things? How do we make it so that education is broad, it's diverse, there's a lot of options, it's way more accountable. It definitely has done the work to make sure you get your value out of it, but it becomes a thing that you go to and from as you want to learn and grow.
But that's not college. That's not what we think of as college today. So I agree with you, right? Would I like a world where everyone graduates from high school and does an apprenticeship and has no further post-secondary education? Absolutely not, right?
Especially with AI, we don't actually know.
Totally, everyone, and nobody in their right mind would want that. But the reality is that, what those apprentices are going to need is probably not 4 years of expensive college, right? They're going to probably need a 6 to 9 month program, and then maybe a 2-year program after that. It will be designed for specifically where they are in their career and how they move on and move up and become a manager and executive and so forth, like all of that. And they'll be delivering the same skills, the same capabilities that college ostensibly, purportedly delivers in terms of those critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills.
You're missing one skill though, social skills, right? I mean, for many of us, and I think this is relevant.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, are social skills better developed in college, or are they better developed actually in work?
Well, I think
Also, let's just be honest, there is a race question that's missing here, which is we know that there are different outcomes, and you look at industries that you can see a vast majority is very white, and there are actual, like, there are structural issues. There are it's actually it's not something that there is definitely going to be a disparity there. And so I think a broad swath just offering apprenticeships or skill-based learning is ignoring the very real issues in society where we have income inequality, and we also have other components that make these kinds of things.
yeah, and I will answer you. I mean, I think for myself and many of you who have sent children to college provides some liminal transitional state between being a child with your parents responsible for your day-to-day and being a full-blown adult.
That was great when it cost $8,000 a year, right? Phenomenal. It worked well. And there are lots of schools where public schools in state, maybe some of your institutions where like that actually is the tuition or it's close to that. And then you have room and board and so forth. And it's challenging. But the reality is that, for the vast majority, it is not free. They are taking on debt, and there needs to be a return on that investment. And I don't blame colleges and universities. I think that they're doing as good a job as they've ever done at equipping young people with cognitive skills, durable skills, and so forth. The problem, it's not college's fault. The economy has moved away. As I say in my last book, college has been closed for the most part. The economy is very open and is moving rapidly, and digital transformation has changed the economy, changed jobs, specifically changed the entry-level jobs that college grads used to get. And colleges have not kept up. And so now we not only have an affordability crisis, which everyone knows, we have an employability crisis that AI is going to turn into a huge problem. And unless colleges change dramatically, college is not worth it today, on average, for if you take like if you didn't know what your status was in life, right? The John Rawls' original position, right? You're behind a veil of ignorance, and you had to say.
Did you learn that during an apprenticeship, John Rawls?
Was it that
your
coding?
Rawlsian reference was during
Look, I don't apologize for, and I do believe. Look, if you can afford to send, and most people in this room probably can afford to send their kids to college and spend whatever, like that's great. Like do it, because. Great that your kid does not have to choose like what they want to do, what they want. Like skills-based training apprenticeships are linear, and they may limit your future choices, but that still for many people is a better option than what we have today.
Well, I mean, we could go into like skill durability and how the life of a skill. We know that is not nearly the one-size-fits-all solution that you might imply. I do think that we are in violent agreement that we need a lot of options. We need to be better connected to the workforce. I can't tell you the number of times that a college or university has launched a program in direct response because a partnership with an employer, they're like, we want to actually support this, and then all of a sudden, psych, we're going to move out of town.
Right.
And so they build a program. They invest thousands, if not millions of dollars in a whole entire offering, and then they pull the rug out from under them. So we cannot treat college as this one-time thing. It is not apart from society. It is absolutely the best of who we are if we actually make it deliver on what it needs to.
I agree with that.
The other is honestly, on the cost thing, yes, it has gone up, but the vast majority of the institutions ignore the Ivy League because they're kind of irrelevant in this conversation. Our institutions actually most institutions are fighting on this issue. They are trying to lower costs. Purdue hasn't raised their tuition in 10 years.
Yeah, they have been.
There are actual real significant wins out there, and the problem is that we have to ask ourselves who benefits from college, and are we all actually, when it comes to how we fund universities, it's been a piecemeal chipping away at their stability, and over time what you see is defensive way, clinging to try and still provide value, and I don't think it's been as effective as you think, and it could improve, but this is not something they did to us.
Let's talk about the bifurcation between, you often reference the top 20 schools that provide a unique value and then,
And where a lot of the research is done, by the way, to your initial point about the.
so, I'm going to go with Jefferson here. So he said a long time ago that, it was essential for people to spend some amount of time cultivating the capacity, this is the quote, to judge for themselves what will secure or endanger their freedom, unencumbered from familial authority and the burdens and toil of work. So college to me 20 years ago, again, it was not about economic ROI. That was important. I was very privileged and lucky, but it was about developing values and ethics and thinking about how to be a citizen. Is that something we should leave to the top 20 top 20 schools or the elite class?
Huge problem. But, I've written about how, this is a triage situation, right? The patient is bleeding out on the table, and we need to, focus on the stuff that is, why are we politically and economically and socially where we are today? It's because half the country feels like there's no opportunity for them. We have not been delivering on. They see this promise of, America and the digital economy and so forth, but they're not able to participate in it. Because we haven't created the pathways to it because, up until very recently, the Democratic Party, and college for all, college is the answer, everything. And the reality is that most of those people come from privileged backgrounds and didn't have to worry about the cost, and we're able to focus on these issues, which are important. But the patient is bleeding out on the table. We need to stop the bleeding.
Who is the patient?
The patient is the student, the young person who is, going to have a negative economic outcome from enrolling in college.
Oh, no, I think they're going to have a negative economic outcome if they do not enroll in college. The college has to adapt and shift and do a better job supporting them, onboarding them,
that's
actually
true,
hold
right.
themselves accountable on student success.
Well, college
all of
needs
that,
to change,
which
but the
they are
question is,
doing.
what is it today? Is college worth it today? It's not,
It is
will
worth it
college
today.
be worth it in the future?
Unequivocally.
That's not the debate.
All the data that you often cite in your newsletter, you're always looking at, I'd love to be able to compete with a boot camp and only have 5 years of data to be held accountable for. Instead, what I'm actually defending is older than the church. Okay, the data, it outpaces everything else. It is where all the foundations upon which the great solutions in society have come, and so you're only looking at a narrow band of time, which is a time in which the economy and industry has rapidly changed. We didn't catch up fast enough. We got the message, we got the memo. We're coming in a little late. We're coming in hot. And clearly we need to do it much more equally distributed. We need to take on fundamental responsibility here.
I want that's going to be
It's
great.
happening. Welcome.
Let's come back here next year and see how many of your schools are actually doing systematic work-based learning across the student body for students in arts and humanities.
Just one example
programs.
is at ASU, they've created something called Work Plus, which is just the recognition that we can sit here and complain about employers not treating our students well or not actually mentoring in them and teaching them, or we can recognize that actually we're the biggest employer of our own students. And so let's fundamentally transform that experience. You have all kinds of solutions that are
I've written about University of
real-time.
Iowa's journalism school buying community newspapers and using them as work experiences for journalism students. We need much more of that, but the problem is that you're citing these as examples, and they're anomalies. That's the problem. They're anomalies because there are thousands of schools where this is not happening.
Honestly, part of the problem is there's so much progress and innovation happening, whether it's about analytics and chatbots and data and advising, and there is so much structural change happening at institutions. It's difficult to keep up.
And much of that is focused on completion, which is a good thing. But what are we completing them into, right? It's not addressing any of the employment economic outcomes that I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I think this is a really nice point for us to end on, which is there's been a lot of talk about measuring ROI and mobility, and we know that mobility is like this North Star. So my institutions decided that they were going to take that on and not just try and measure it, which is what we think is considered naturally the baseline, but actually improve it. And what I've done now is try to be okay, I assume there's a bunch of measures I could use. No, there's a bunch of conversation about it. There have been little tiny tests and such, but we actually need to come to agreement about how it is colleges should measure. Is it employment at first job? Because if you think about it, when you think about your first job and when you really felt like college was worth it, what was that moment like and how would I measure that? And I think there's a broad answer there.
We gotta move to our final exercise. Ryan, if you have something in 20 seconds to say. Okay. Every podcast we do at the Disagreement, we end with something we call the Steel Man. Have you guys heard of steel manning? Anyone out here heard of it? Okay, so it is the opposite of a straw man, okay? It's when you take your disagreement partner's arguments and you put them in the strongest possible, you articulate them in the strongest possible way to show that you've been listening and, okay? So this is gonna be good, it's a test. And that you perhaps have some empathy for them, empathy not required. Now, here's what we're gonna do. You're each gonna get a chance, and then your disagreement partner will judge you and give you a grade on how well you did articulating their position. Who wants to go first? You gotta say it in the first person and really commit to it. Who wants to go first?
Bridget, you've done an amazing job.
No. That's true. You have to say, I believe the college is worth it. In the first person, articulate her position.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
This is hard for me to do. I believe that college is more than just the economic outcomes for individual students on a relatively short-term measure. I believe that college has benefits for society, for research and innovation, for citizenship, and that the millions of well-meaning people who are currently engaged in the higher education enterprise are working extremely hard to catch up with economic change and digital transformation and do better in terms of employment outcomes, so we can do even better on those short-term economic outcomes for young people.
So to all these people out here considering college, you got to finish it off, please.
Please think carefully.
So close.
That was so uncomfortable. You seemed so deeply uncomfortable. I wanted to hold your hand and be like,
All right,
are you
wait,
okay?
give him a grade. You got to give him a grade. A through.
I give you an A for effort.
For effort? No. This is not the Ivy
no,
League. This is not the Ivy League. You got to give a real grade.
Yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't give you like you wouldn't get a skill-based hire for it. B plus.
B plus. All right. B plus. All right, Bridget. Here we go.
Higher education is dramatically underperformed and has caused real harm in society and needs to evolve. And I think that there are alternative models that I'm not trying to throw everything away, but that you absolutely need to take them seriously. They're going to be an expansive solution that we need to invest in. Instead of this one-size-fits-all approach, we need to recognize the complexity of the future is going to demand a multitude of different approaches. And that is why Achieve Partners is here to invest.
All right, great. You got to get that. That was good. That was good.
I'm gonna have to pay you for that now. That was better than mine, I think.
So
A minus.
what? A minus? Okay.
I was a state champion in debate.
Yeah, that was good. All right. So before we do the final clap, please make sure, if you enjoyed this, to subscribe to The Disagreement. You can go to thedisagreement.com on your phone, subscribe. We do education, but we also do all topics, politics, culture, you name it. And with that, let's give a huge round of applause to our two debaters for the day. We'll see you here next year with a year's worth of data from Bridget. We'll try to do this again in a year.